Greetings folks, must be time for some more space engineers. Now this server is a survival server with lots of angry red things flying at us trying to kill us all the time, which is always good. Big pirate fortresses like this are few and far between, but generally it's an aggressive environment. So this is the new ship I've been working on, we'll be taking a look at today. My new Mothership, large grid, it mines, it salvages, it jump drives. It's a bit of a jack of all trades. Some footage from its little test flight here. So I'll primarily be showing how it's built. So this is, I initially was thinking that I would have the jump drive overhead in the main room in the bridge so that you look up at the jump drive like some sort of magnificent church ceiling, but I swapped that around. I made it the floor so you're actually walking on the shiny jump drive graphic. So it's at the bottom, it's surrounded by steel, and then I'm setting it up so that a lot of the structure is batteries and small cargo boxes. So down at floor level it's going to be batteries, and up the top here you can see all these dark grey black small cargo boxes that I've strung together, and they form a roof in the interior and a bit of a significant part of the top deck, because you always need connections to cargo on your top deck for parachutes and turrets and connectors and all sorts of things. So down below here we're going to throw in a bunch of batteries, and when we take the scaffolding out of the middle of those, the batteries will be the floor and those cargo boxes will be the ceiling for a passage you can walk down on either side of the ship. So the nose where these big engines are I've attached. They're cheap and easy to build. I've slapped them on early. That gives me a gauge for where everything is. It goes, heights of everything. But those engines are in the nose. So the jump drive, this is the sort of center of the ship, and then the rear of the ship will be all the business of refineries and assemblers and all that sort of shenanigans will have to go down the back. A bit of a block. So this is the first lifting ion engine. This is a nuclear powered, almost all electric ship. It's got emergency braking and maneuvering hydrogen, but beyond that it's pretty much crazily expensively electric. It's got 12 downwards facing large ions and 2 rear facing ones, so it's got 14 large ions to build, which isn't particularly cheap in a survival server. Don't ask me about the weird conveyor arrangement I've got going underneath with the red non-operational conveyor. Don't worry about that, it's all good. It's a feature, not a bug. So from above, the nose will have the big jet engines, which are less vital, less expensive than the ions, so they can be out the front taking a bit of a beating. And then there's just a 4-pack of these big ion engines on each side, and they're flanking a passageway that runs straight across the ship, so that you've got a door into the ship from either end. So down the front there's a similar arrangement, but that'll all be filled in with junk. But the fundamentals of this ship is to use these small cargoes as both conveyor and storage simultaneously, to avoid having to build large cargo boxes. As efficient as they are, they're big and blocky, and I've got plenty of big and blocky things going into the ship already that dictate what shape it's going to be. So rather than putting in big storage boxes for my cargo, I've just snaked these small ones around the ship, and that way I can have practically no conveyors on this ship. I think I have 2 or 3 conveyor junctions, maybe 4 conveyor junctions, and a conveyor pipe and a conveyor elbow. That would be my conveyor pitch for the finished product of this ship. I'd say about 6 pieces of conveyor on a whole large grid mothership. These small cargo boxes just do all the work. They're potentially not as tidy as just having everything in big boxes, but I generally open a hatch and just type steel or interior or ox or whatever I'm going for. I'm typing it into the search bar. I'm not digging through various boxes looking for the thing. So it doesn't really matter how many boxes or where anything is. I can just use the search to zero in on what I'm looking for, grab it and go. So I don't find the lots of small boxes approach too inconvenient for my playstyle. So you can see the rows of batteries that are forming a cross shape on the floor there. Structural batteries are good. Batteries are very tough and very useful. So I'd rather build from batteries than from plate. But there is some nice shiny white plate in a layer around the jump drive that forms the floor of the central room, the bridge essentially of the ship. It's only got one interior room and the control seat is in it. So I've got a T section of cargo going on the nose to mount guns on. The idea being to have reasonable amount of beweaponment down the front, guns wise, some on the roof, some on the flanks. I tend to put a lot of guns underneath. Some of the nose guns will be underneath. And that said, I'm going to have a sip of my cup of tea. So, sprouting some guns on the nose, trying to line up. Guns are a bit of a room hog. Guns on the flanks with doors straight underneath them. So on the side of each ship is a gun turret with a door directly under it. So security wise you really have to run the gauntlet of the getting very close to the big gun if you're some sort of an enemy soldier trying to break into this ship. Well, trying to walk in the front door anyway. If you were breaking in, I imagine you'd come in from a sneaky angle with your grinder like a sensible fellow. But that's the basic idea. All those small cargoes act as a distribution system for the ammo that the guns need. There's also a couple of gas tanks down near the nose. They can distribute gas. You can of course pump absolutely everything through a cargo box, so there's no restrictions on what can go where. And up on your roof level you just always need a lot of hatches. You're going to need to put some parachutes up there, and ideally you want them to just be auto feeding canvas from your cargo system. There's going to be more turrets that go on the roof. They're going to need hatches. What else? Connectors. Connectors for unloading and loading smaller ships go on the roof. So there's always plenty of hatches needed on the roof. Plus you probably want a convenient location that you can just land on the top of your ship, open a hatch and get out the goodies you need and then jetpack away without actually having to go into your ship to do it. So these sort of round drum things at the nose are shield generators for the energy shields mod, and they are not staying. The rearmost ones are, but the frontmost ones are going to go. So energy shields are good. They give you an integrity shield. If you bump into things physically, they'll protect you. Whereas the other shield, I use the bubble shield, not so much. So starting to incorporate the gas tanks and the shields, and starting to put some armour, angled armour around the nose there, trying to visualise the final shape, because I'm going for a spearhead shape. And so I'm adding some of the rear section here. So there's a big fat refinery, nice and heavy down the back there. It's being fed by a conveyor system. Well, it's actually the assembler right there. And that assembler is plugged into a sorter above it. That's a component sorter that sucks components as they're made out of the assembler and pumps them into the main area that's full of components. And on the back of the assembler next to the refinery there is one of those few cargo conveyor junctions I was talking about that this ship has. There's another one above there, so there's two back here and there's two sorters back here. So this sorter will be the ingot sorter. When the refinery's been running for a while, its inventory can get full of ingots. It's great at pulling in ore, but it sucks at getting rid of ingots. And the assembler's the same. It's great at pulling in ingots that it needs, but it sucks at getting rid of the ones it doesn't, and it sucks at getting rid of the components, and its inventory ends up full as well. So this particular sorter sucks ingots out of both the refinery and the assembler, and it puts them into this bunch of boxes over here, which is going to be a bunch of purple ingot boxes that are going to be slightly separated from the rest of the storage system. They're going to be their own little ingot zone over on the side there. It's basically how my refinery setups work. I always set them up so that I can slurp the ingots out of both and the components out of the assembler. So I almost always build the assembler next to the refinery for convenience. So here you can see the X-shaped distribution system that runs along the ceiling of the ship, pumping gases and ammos and whatever is needed to wherever it's needed. So down the back is the business end where the refinery and the assembler and the ingot storage is located. There's also the O2 generator underneath. It's just got a line of batteries, and the foot shall be moved, I think, from there. So the white hatch on the end there, that's the H2O2 generator, plugged into the same network of cargo boxes, so it can draw ice from the cargo boxes and spit gas back out. And on the opposite side is the two token bits of conveyor I mentioned that this ship has. It's got that straight bit and that elbow bit, and they're mostly just decorative, just to give it a conveyor-y space pipe look. And that white box plugs into the refinery, so that's where the refinery gets its ore from. And if I'm running around with ore in my inventory, I'll stick it in the white box. Got the O2 H2 generator at the top there, and these purple boxes, all purple boxes, are ingot storage. So these two purple boxes will be plugged into reactors, so that when I mine uranium, the ore is initially in the cross-shaped cargo area, then gets funneled into the refinery, turned into ingots, slurped out, put in the purple boxes, slurped out of those and into the reactors without me having to interact with it in any way. Keep some emergency ingots stored elsewhere, but that's the main feng shui of the flow. So, adding some little manoeuvring ion thrusters that point upwards and sideways and forwards in various directions adding two big ass ion thrusters to the back that are the main propulsive sort of ones. Gives it a slightly A-wing sort of a shape with the engines on the sides like that, and you can see the general outline of the ship emerging here. It's more or less just a skinned version of this with all these ion drives finished off. The nose is, well, a lot of it is a very different shape, but this is the general gist. We've now got the ramps / landing legs on the port and starboard sides directly below the two doors. So we've got a nice section of white floor there, and that's pretty well the only significant armour blocks on the ship. It's the only blob of light armour. It's just to make a nice white shiny floor for the Star Wars effect of it all. And we've got some Dummy Industries build and repair nano systems have arrived, and some drill systems which you'll be able to see when we get some interior shots. So quite a lot of progress. You can see this ramp goes up to a door there with a gun straight above it, so when you're landed flat on a lake or something, that ramp is touching the ground, so there's effectively a ramp leg on either side of the ship. So there's the drills. That's a tokamak reactor which will be moved. Those are the nano drills, so they don't even have to be on the outside of the ship, and they can scoop me up whatever I need. I've added the survival kit onto the ore box. That ore detector will go. There's assembler access down the back of the room. Nice and convenient. Nano assemblers on the sides there. Build and repair. Those two just repair my own ship. Have a repair area around this ship because obviously this being a refinery and everything as well, it's a component manufacturing ship, so it has to be able to build projects that are nearby as well as repairing itself. So what have I added here? I've put some shield generators inside the bridge and put some flux coils on them, which are more of the energy shield mod. So the bridge is starting to take a bit of shape. I've started putting some angled or more angled armour plates around the nose and the flanks to try and get a feel for the shape. There's yield modules on the bottom of the refinery now, because you know you want maximum yield. Those gyros will be moved. That's not a gyro home in a long-term way. It's me thinking out loud as to where gyros should go. On top, that half-built thing is the shield emitter for the bubble shield, the other kind of shield that I use, and they're going to be flipped around. Those gyros will come on top and the shield emitter will go down below, because it has to be exposed to the open air to work. It can't be buried under armour in the ship, so I like to put it on the bottom of my ship so that when I'm landed it's not exposed to fire in any way. So those will be swapped around. There's a token connector on the roof now. There's a token gun on the roof, which isn't in its final position either. Those are flux coils that make my shields regenerate faster, which are dead handy. So this ship relies on having two overlapping different kinds of shield and a decent amount of firepower to do a bit of tanking, because it's not particularly manoeuvrable and all the armour is pretty lightweight. There is no heavy armour on this ship. Got two rows of batteries on the roof there, and on top of those batteries I put some grills and then started shaping and sculpting a roof over the main bridge, and I've redistributed that one central gun into two side guns mounted on conveyor junctions. So that's the other two conveyor junctions in the ship. Could have used storage boxes. So it's mostly half-sized light armor panels and sloping panels set all around the edges and on the roof. Not very many one thick panels except on the floor of this room. So it's starting to look a bit like its eventual self. So we've got some parachute hatches appearing in the roof now along the central ridge. Those obviously feed directly from underneath down into my cargo worm setup. Got the antenna and the oil detector on the rear. On the underside is that still partly built shield emitter. Most of the ions are built at this stage. I've got a little bit of a locking landing foot at the back, landing ramps at the sides, and then there's just this narrow foot down the front with the dumper in front of it. That's just a connector that I can dump extra ice or stone or whatever's clogging up and weighing me down. That can just be spat out the bottom of the ship. And then above is the reverse of that. You've got the slurper, where any ship that lands on that will just have its contents slurped out. So the assembler's down the back. I've got a panel for some controls. Brad's stash is blue over there. The emergency stash is red over there. The front of the bridge is mostly full of sort of shiny things that look good. I've got the hatch that drops you down for access underneath the ship from the bridge. Nice sheltered, protected from the ship position. Overhead you've got all the hatches you need to access things. So it looks kind of nice and fancy in that direction. And then the back of the bridge is all business with the assembler and the refinery and everything there. So I quite like those access ramps. They work pretty good, I think. Starting to take shape now. This is the final pointy nose. It's got the hydrogen mounted on the sides. And as far as flying in the Earth atmosphere goes, this is just the 4 big jets, the atmospheric thrusters that face down. I dialed them up to maximum, switched them on, disconnected, and hurtled upward at maximum speed pretty damn quickly. So even with a big heavy mining cargo on board, these jet power only is enough to keep me aloft. Obviously ions aren't much use down low, but when you've got 12 of them you still get a bit of extra thrust out of them. But I'm not actually using them yet. I'm dialing them up. I've just switched them on there. I dialed them up to maximum power, which as you can see is nothing. Getting 3 meganewtons each out of those 4 big jets, whereas my ions are the number that's gradually crawling up towards 500 there. So the higher I get, the more effective my ions become, which is always nice. And it's very smooth for leaving the atmosphere. There's no kerfuffle whatsoever. The jets absolutely thunder you upwards. You've got plenty of momentum, and then you can see at this height the jets have dropped down to 1 meganewtons worth, whereas the ions are climbing rapidly upwards, just gone from 1 to 2 meganewtons, and there's a lot more of them. So again, I'm thundering upwards at maximum speed. There goes my jets. As I approached the 10-kilometer mark, the amount of energy from my jets is plummeting downwards, down to 400, down to 300, and eventually that'll zero out. I'll just switch those jets off. Boonk. Jets are off. Ion engines are now at 3 meganewtons each, so they're throwing me upwards with great gusto and chewing my power, not maxing my power out, you'll note. So we just tap those down a little bit. 2 meganewtons is still plenty. Just adjust them and so that I'm not burning quite as crazy amount of energy to leave. And then we just cruise on upwards. That's how that's done. Super easy, no hydrogen required. Vertical takeoff and landing is how I like to roll. Down to Down to 600 odd, are we dropping? No. 600 odd, it started to drop, but now our gravity is down to 0.4. So, threw us straight back upwards. I've just fired up one of the tokamak reactors to boost my power supply for a little bit after takeoff. Still hurtling upwards at maximum speed. So the number 9 key there, that's just the off-on switch for my emergency hydrogen lift. If for some reason the jets and the ions aren't cutting it, I can just blast in 6 of those. It's the same on this setup. The 8 is the emergency lift, the 2 is the emergency brakes. So I've got 4 forward-facing hydrogen thrusters that are always maxed out, or currently maxed out. So if I need to stop in a hurry, I just tap 2 and they blast a ridiculous amount of force forward and slow me down very quickly. Everything else on this particular toolbar is very self-explanatory. The connector is the connector I was docked with, and the foot is faded out because I think I moved the foot since last making the foot button, so I'm going to have to make a new foot button at this stage. It's ghosted out. But that's where the clamping of the foot button would go. Parachutes obviously, so there's trying out the emergency hydrogen thrusters. Confirm that they're working and doing the business. So the jump drive is a little vulnerable on the bottom of the ship there, but it's not going to collide with the ground unless I come in very, very hard, and I've got 2 layers of shield protecting it. I've even got a layer of shield protecting it from the ground. Now my guns all perk up and aim at this guy, but they don't shoot him. And I think what was happening at this stage is maybe weapon core was bugged, because he's not shooting me and I'm not shooting him, but we've got weapons trained on one another in an aggressive stance. Fortunately, I've got an alternative weapon. I've got a bunch of salvagers on the front, the dummy industries build and repair, set to grind only. That's my targeting box for my nano grinders, so I'm just lining him up. There's between my ship and that box is a field that will initially just disable their guns and power and thrusters, and then with the tap of a key I can turn the disabling feature off and just go into salvage mode. So I've just raised my bubble shield because you need to sort that out, adjust it, like it needs to be lowered a bit for this ship. It could be shrunk down, it doesn't need to be that big, and it could be adjusted downwards and lowered. So shakedown cruise stuff, figuring out if you've got enough gyros to comfortably turn, setting up your shield. I've just been merrily grinding this little attack drone into submission, since it can't shoot at me and I can't shoot at it. I just absorbed it instead. So the idea is that we have a rendezvous outside the gravity well, which is where I am here, fighting off some corrupt pirates. And the idea is that Brad was launching his small grid combat ship, which is bristling with weapons, and it would dock with the roof of this ship because, of course, being small grid, it doesn't have a jump drive. So the idea would be that we would combine ships and use my jump drive to go off and find a new planet, because if you're going to do a shakedown cruise with a jump drive ship, you're going to have to jump somewhere. Supposed to be ambitious, so there we go. Brad came fighting up in his green attack ship, docked on to my roof with some difficulty because there seemed to be some teething trouble bugs going on. Bit of a buggy test flight in general, this one, it seemed. So we had a situation where even with his inertial dampeners off, Brad's engines had a habit of sort of kicking in and affecting our flights, which was a bit of a pain. But we figured out that this planet in the distance near the sun looked pretty fancy. We had no idea which particular planet this one was. Got a jump drive and lots of uranium. Time to go for an explore. An explore and a fight was the general idea, but the overall bugginess of things made fighting come down to mostly ramming, I think, at this stage, unless you've got salvagers like I have. So 1200 kilometre range, blind jumping. Haven't been to where I'm going before. Heading for that mysterious looking planet in the distance. So yes, jump driving with things attached isn't an issue, but in this game having two people piloting different ships and then joining them with a connector is a bit of an invitation for bugs, but anyway, can't let that stop us. So the old jump drive works nicely. The first charge is kind of on the house because it was charged up from wind power on the Earth-like planet, so that's a bit of a freebie. But from here on in it's battery power and nuclear power. So after some wrestling with why is Brad's ship desperately trying to stop us from going anywhere, we were still able to propel forwards obviously, but instead of just coasting along as you do outside a gravity well with your dampeners off, I had to keep reapplying thrust because Brad's ship would just slow us right back down again. Obviously his ship had the dampeners off, but somehow two ships with the dampeners off counts as one ship with the dampeners on. There's some logic there somewhere. Best not to go looking for it though. So after some fun and games experiments that are the bulk of Space Engineer's gameplay, we eventually just gave up on trying to fix the problem, as you do, and just kept on flying and hoped we wouldn't die. We eventually set it up so that Brad could just switch off all these engines manually until eventually they stopped slowing us down, and eventually they stopped burning little holes in my hull. It was all quite civilized by the end, but it took us 4 jumps to get to the alien planet, which is a lot of jumps. It's a long way away. And it did in fact turn out to be this sort of green, foggy alien planet of buggy doom. The moon might be nice, but the planet itself is pretty from a distance. I think that's the best place for the alien planet, to look at it from a distance. It is a painful place. More jumps. Cranking through. Bit of uranium. Had some pirates swooping in, but then we jump away and they don't get to do nothing. Still more jumps to go. It's absolute miles to the... It's less than 1 full jump from here. So at this point I was getting the you can't jump into gravity, dialing it back sort of messages when I was trying to jump. which is always a good sign. So I just dialed it back to the point that it would allow me to jump, and then ninja'd in a bit closer. In we go. So yeah, I was happy with the jump drive performance. As long as you've got plenty of uranium, you can go on some ludicrously long journey if you take it in chunks. And if you bring along a friend with some thrusters who'll burn a hole in the roof of your ship, that's always a bonus. Charge the drive back up for the return journey. So this was the original shakedown cruise version of the ship. The nose wasn't quite as pointy yet. Obviously rockets are better when they're pointy, so the nose got a little pointier. A few added features, more batteries and things were added here and there. But overall it's the same ship, hovering up above the ugly bug planet. Looks a bit infected, and it is. It's infected with angry, disgusting bugs. It's not a friendly place, and the gravity is huge, and it's got some sort of an atmosphere going on that I'm not sure how to interpret. Your jets work nicely once you get down low. I think your ions, it seems like it has a different balance to the Earth-like planet, where the Earth-like planet, your jets stop working around 10 k's or whatever, and your ions are already cranking up and compensating by then. Not much of a dead zone going on between the two, whereas this, I think, is a bit harsh. You come in under ion power, suddenly they lose all their grunt, but your jets haven't gained it yet. So unless you've got some emergency hydrogen or whatnot, you're likely to come flogging in a bit unexpectedly hard as you fly down over the alien planet. Either that or the bugginess was with us in great strength on this particular day, and we had a buggier re-entry than usual. It's always a possibility. But it seemed like the atmosphere was mostly to blame. I blame it on a bad atmos. The other thing about the bug planet is trying to find somewhere flat to land a decent sized ship. You've sort of got these rusty coloured lakey things, but everything's very mountainous, particularly if you want any access to ice. If you're erring on the side of caution and wanting a bit of an ice supply near where you're landing, everything icy is very mountainous, and the whole thing is like covered in ridges and trees and problems. Like I tried to put down in a few places around here, and even though I was sort of sitting solidly here, my locking foot hasn't actually locked to the ground here. I'm just sort of stable because I've got 4 legs, but I guess I've more or less got 5 legs because my connector in the middle acts as it's the same height, same distance, it's a 5th middle leg. So I'm somehow sitting on 4 of my 5 legs, but the one that's up in the air just happens to be the one that locks. So yes, rainy, ugly, stormy bug planet. Brad flew off and had a look round and landed and got swarmed by a large number of bugs, and then discovered that he'd left his assault rifle on my ship in his storage box, didn't have it with him, and was poorly prepared for dealing with some sort of Klendathu of a planet. When we originally packed for the journey, we didn't necessarily know we were going to the alien bug planet. We just saw a pretty planet in the distance and thought we'd fly over and have a look. So I will rank the planet as a disappointment. I know it's a high difficulty planet that's meant to be angry, but I would rate my ship as entirely satisfactory. Obviously I kept modifying it after I got it home, but still, wasn't a lot. Happy with the overall config of this for an electric ship. I think I might make a big crazy giant all hydrogen ship. There's my little hydrogen emergency lift, giving him a bit of a test run on the way out there. Definitely like having hydrogen brakes, hydrogen lift and hydrogen boosted strafing on any electric ship, because ions are just a bit anemic when it comes to manoeuvrability. I'm not the kind of guy who makes a lot of disaster area stunt ships that like to fly upside down in an atmosphere, but you also don't want a ship that's just going to casually coast into a nearby mountain because its think ahead brakes have a thinking time of a fortnight. Don't want that. So if you're going to the alien planet, I recommend going to the alien planet's moon instead of the alien planet, because the alien planet's gravity well sucks. And it's a long way to get here, but there is lots of asteroids on the way. I wasn't swooping in close and doing the ore detecting thing, but I imagine I could have snaffled some uranium on the way. So there it is in its final configuration with the pointier nose. This is what the externals look like. It's got some hydrogen strafing engines pointing out sideways now. It's a tiny bit longer and a tiny bit pointier, but overall she's the same old girl. Works a treat, I feel. And the interior's pretty well the same. I added a couple of gyros after the shakedown cruise, just to have a faster, nimbler pointing for using my salvaging beam. We already had, I think all the other features were pretty well there from the beginning though. The 4 parachutes. There's our interior, so that's Brad's storage box. These 4 buttons are just for the sorters and for emergency shields up. So I've added some extra gyros to the front of the bridge there. But all in all, it's much of a muchness. It's the little hatch so you can get down underneath the ship and then you're sheltered by the ship while you're mining or welding or doing whatever under there. There's my pretty bridge and my pretty ship, and I hope you liked it.